The Empire had long spread across the stars, its ships towering over countless worlds and civilizations that had once dared to stand against it. Their resistance, quickly crushed under its immense power. Humanity, however, had remained untouched, a small blue planet in the far reaches of the galaxy, ignored for centuries. It wasn't of any particular interest to the Empire. No advanced weapons, no impressive resources, no spacefaring technology. They had dismissed Earth as insignificant, a mere speck in the vastness of space. But that was before the Empire's leaders grew restless. Their thirst for control became insatiable, and Earth was now marked for conquest. The message was brief and to the point, transmitted across all frequencies in every language known and unknown. The Empire's voice would be heard, and it would be obeyed. The message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. This was their only warning. The people of Earth heard the message echoed in every corner of the planet, broadcast on televisions and radios in every city across the globe. It was impossible to ignore the alien ships visible from every city. They descended like dark clouds, blocking the sunlight, their silhouettes casting long shadows across the land. The news reports spoke of invasion fleets encircling Earth's orbit. Military leaders began to prepare, cities braced for impact, governments scrambled to respond. Yet amid the chaos, there was something strange, something unsettling. No army mobilized, no missiles were fired. The silence was deafening, as if humanity was waiting for something even the world's leaders could not explain. They too felt the strange unease spreading like a chill through the air, as though they were holding their collective breath, waiting for a sign, something more than mere fear. The broadcast from the Empire had left the planet in turmoil. Citizens were unsure of what to do. Their instincts screamed to flee, to fight, to run, to defend their world. But in every country, from the United States to China to the heart of Africa to the coasts of Australia, there was no response. The people waited in silence with bated breath as they watched the skies darken with the shadow of the Empire's armada. Across the streets and in the crowded offices of Earth's capitals, no one spoke. The decision was left hanging in the air, like an unspoken word. The silence stretched longer than anyone anticipated. Days turned into weeks with no response from Earth's leaders, no message of surrender, no counterattack, no rallying cry to the people. Earth remained utterly still, an eerie calm descending upon the planet. The Empire watched from above with growing frustration and curiosity. What was taking so long? Why was Earth not responding? The might of their fleet was too much for any world to stand against. Their weapons were more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. The calculations had been simple. No force could oppose them, yet Earth remained still. No messages, no signals, no attempt to plead for mercy. This unnerved the Empire. It was a defiance of the natural order of things, a challenge to their authority, something they couldn't understand, and it made them angry. Who dared to ignore the great Empire? Were these humans truly so foolish, so insignificant that they had no intention of saving themselves from extinction, or was there something more at play than they realized? The days dragged on with no movement from the planet below, no sign of resistance, no cry for help, as Earth's silence stretched further and further into the depths of the galaxy. As the days turned into weeks, the Empire's fleet grew more imposing, its massive warships now dominating Earth's skies. The once clear blue heavens were blotted out by their dark presence, the ships' sleek, metallic hulls reflecting the sun in a way that seemed to mock the fragile planet below. The skies were no longer just a natural phenomenon. They were now a silent battlefield, and Earth was at the mercy of something far beyond its comprehension. From every corner of the globe, humanity stood frozen, staring upward. The sight of the Empire's fleet, numbering in the thousands, was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Yet the silence from Earth's leaders remained unbroken. It wasn't that the people didn't see the danger. Everyone knew the stakes. The threat had been made clear: surrender or face annihilation. But the planet continued to do nothing. No unified call for action, no military mobilization, no evacuation orders. Every government, every faction, seemed to have adopted the same posture: silent, still, and watchful. The silence was felt in every household, every street corner, and every bustling city. People walked through their routines, their everyday lives unaffected by the invasion happening above them. Some were confused, others fearful, But the common thread was the absence of panic. The silence spread like a virus, infecting the very heart of human society. Above the cities, the Empire's ships loomed larger and larger, blocking out the stars. From space, the ships resembled an approaching storm, massive, unstoppable, and overwhelming. The Empire's commanders were used to planets bending to their will, civilizations crumbling under their might. They had conquered worlds with greater resistance than Earth, and yet this one remained eerily quiet. The first strike came without warning. A single warship, stationed far above Earth's atmosphere, unleashed a pulse of energy that lit up the skies. The pulse rippled through the atmosphere, causing the very air to hum with power. The blast tore through the night, a signal to Earth that the time for silence had passed. And yet, in the aftermath, no response came, no desperate messages, no frantic plea for peace, no counterattack. Just the hum of the Earth, the faint noise of life continuing below as if nothing had changed. The cities that had been struck were still standing. Their lights flickered in the distance, some dimming, but most continuing to shine brightly against the deepening night. It was as though the planet refused to acknowledge the scale of the threat looming over it. The Empire's ships, poised for further destruction, waited and waited. From the decks of their flagship, the Empire's commanders convened. They exchanged confused glances as they reviewed Earth's response, or rather, the lack of it. Was this planet truly so primitive, so detached from the reality of the universe, that they would simply let their world be obliterated without a fight? Or was there something else at play here? The silence continued to be the most puzzling part. If Earth had no weapons, no means to defend itself, why then was it not screaming in terror, not begging for mercy? Something wasn't right. A plan was unfolding beneath the surface, one that neither the Empire's might nor its vast intelligence could yet comprehend. The Empire's officers and generals sat in cold silence as they waited for an answer they could not understand. Earth had not surrendered, but the more the Empire watched, the more they began to sense something far more dangerous than they had first imagined. Something powerful was hidden beneath the calm. Something the Empire had failed to see. The Empire's patience wore thin as days stretched into weeks with no sign of the response they had expected. Their warships, a flotilla of power and destruction, remained poised in orbit, their weapon systems primed for further strikes. The silence from Earth was becoming unbearable, each passing hour adding to the growing tension among the Empire's high command. For a species accustomed to quick subjugation, this was not only frustrating, it was a challenge to their very authority. Generals aboard the flagship argued over the course of action. The invasion had gone as expected at first. They had sent their ultimatum. Their fleet loomed in the sky, and their initial strike had broken the peace of Earth's atmosphere. Yet nothing had followed. No countermeasures, no retaliatory strikes from Earth's militaries, no declarations of war. The quiet remained. Why aren't they reacting? One of the senior officers demanded, pacing in front of the tactical display. A planet this small, with no advanced defenses, should have been trembling in fear at the very sight of us. We've bombarded their cities, wiped out their communications, and still, nothing. A lower-ranking officer spoke up, a tremor in his voice. Sir, perhaps they've already accepted their fate. Perhaps they're preparing to surrender. Another officer scoffed. Surrender, after everything we've done to them. That makes no sense. These humans should be cowering by now. Instead, they're silent. The commanding officer finished, his voice cold. I know, and that's what worries me. The truth of it was, no one on the Empire's flagship had ever encountered anything like this before. Most species, once faced with overwhelming force, would beg for mercy, attempt desperate negotiations, or even launch suicidal counterattacks. But Earth simply did nothing. It was a mystery that gnawed at the heart of the Empire's leaders, a mystery they could not afford to leave unsolved. At the same time, the silence was starting to affect the crew. Officers and soldiers alike grew uneasy, a palpable tension building among them. Despite their technological superiority, despite the vast array of weapons at their disposal, the Empire had no answers. No one on Earth seemed to be making any attempt to communicate, and even as their bombardments continued, they could feel something stirring beneath the surface. Something far more ominous than they had expected. "We need to force their hand," the commander said, slamming his fist down on the table. "We're going to land our troops, take their cities, end this charade." Within hours, the Empire's massive landing crafts were descending upon Earth, their hulking frames casting massive shadows over the sprawling urban centers below. The soldiers disembarked, prepared to crush whatever resistance remained, certain that they would quickly overwhelm the humans. Yet as the ships landed and their forces began to spread out across Earth's surface, they encountered something unexpected. Not chaos, not resistance, but stillness. People moved quietly through the streets, as if they had never been disturbed. The cities were eerily empty, the markets closed, the traffic gone. Every building stood in stark contrast to the invasion unfolding above it, as if humanity had collectively decided to simply wait. No resistance forces emerged from hiding. No insurgents staged attacks. No weapons fired from hidden bunkers. There was only a profound and unsettling silence that hung thick in the air, heavier than any force the Empire had ever faced. "Where are they?" One of the soldiers muttered under his breath as he looked around at the vacant streets, his voice tinged with confusion. The city was unnaturally still, and every passing moment only deepened the unease. The Empire's soldiers patrolled with their weapons drawn, but they found no need to use them. No one to fight, no one to threaten. Just the quiet. A quiet that seemed to stretch endlessly. And that perhaps was the most disconcerting thing of all. It wasn't the absence of resistance, it was the absence of anything at all. Earth, it seemed, was holding its breath. The Empire's invasion force moved forward with the expectation of victory, yet the very nature of the silence sent a ripple of doubt through their ranks. What were the humans waiting for? Why had they not fought back? As they pushed deeper into the heart of Earth's cities, one thought began to form in the minds of the invaders. Were they being watched? As the Empire's troops spread across Earth's surface, they quickly encountered a peculiar and unsettling truth. No military defense, no organized resistance, no civilian panic. Instead, they found only stillness, a stillness that gnawed at their certainty and sowed seeds of doubt. Their initial airstrike, a warning shot meant to break the silence and force a response, had landed without consequence. The explosions were immense, lighting up the sky and tearing through several major cities, yet the aftermath was strangely quiet. There were no screams of terror, no cries of desperation. Earth's inhabitants seemed to have vanished, leaving behind only the eerie echoes of the Empire's violence. The Empire's commanders, still baffled by the strange behavior of the planet's inhabitants, made a decision. If Earth would not fight, if it would not beg for mercy, then they would make Earth's leaders feel the full force of the Empire's wrath. No more waiting, no more hesitation. They would make an example of this world, swiftly and decisively. The Empire's flagship, a massive behemoth of war and destruction, hovered over the most populous regions of Earth, its sensors scanning the ground for signs of life. The ship's command center was alive with activity, every officer alert and ready to unleash their next attack. The plan was simple: take out Earth's infrastructure completely. Disable the communications, the power grids, the transportation hubs, anything that could be used to resist. Render the planet helpless and force them to surrender. The first target was Earth's communication satellites. In a coordinated barrage, a series of energy pulses fired from the flagship's weapon systems, severing the delicate threads that held the planet's communication network together. The result was immediate. Global television broadcasts went dark, radio signals cut out, and all digital communications halted. The Empire had effectively isolated Earth from the outside world, cutting off any chance for an organized resistance to rise. But even as the lights went out and the world descended into a technological blackout, the planet remained still. The cities were now in chaos, but not from resistance. People moved through the darkened streets with a strange calm, as if this too were part of the plan. Still, there was no rebellion, no uprising. It was as if the entire planet had accepted the Empire's fate for them. But the silence continued to hang in the air like a thick fog, and something in that silence began to unsettle the invaders even more. And then came the second strike. This time, the Empire didn't wait for the humans to show themselves. They unleashed a full bombardment of energy blasts, devastating large swaths of Earth's most significant cities. The blasts sent shockwaves through the atmosphere, sending skyscrapers toppling like brittle towers of sand, reducing the once thriving metropolises to rubble. There were no counterattacks, no resistance movements emerging from the ruins. Earth's people, it seemed, had chosen their fate. The Empire had forced their hand, and yet still, there was no sign of struggle. It was during the second wave of destruction that the Empire's officers began to feel a strange sense of unease creeping in. This wasn't the kind of battle they were used to. No shouts from the enemy, no counteroffensive to suppress, no panic to quell. Earth, instead of fighting, had become a mute observer to its own destruction. It wasn't just the humans' lack of action that disturbed them. It was the fact that the Empire's assault was having no visible effect on the planet's resolve. The situation became even stranger when reports began flooding in from the ground. The cities, now in ruins, showed no signs of mass casualties. Buildings had collapsed, fires raged, and the dust of destruction clouded the air, but the streets were empty. The people were gone, or had they never been there? There was no way to tell. The Empire had expected a planet in chaos, a world full of people scrambling for survival, but what they found was the silence of an abandoned world. Where are they? One of the senior officers muttered, frustration bubbling to the surface. Why aren't they fighting back? The officer's words hung in the air like a curse. Something was wrong. The more the Empire pressed, the more the silence seemed to grow. The ships in orbit remained locked in place, weapons trained on the dying cities below, but there was no one to challenge them, no one to stop them. Yet, deep down, the Empire's commanders knew that this stillness could not last forever. Something was coming. They just couldn't see it yet. It was the strange hum that first gave it away. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint vibration in the ground that seemed to ripple outward from beneath Earth's surface. The Empire's commanders, focused on their destruction of the planet, paid it no mind. It was insignificant, or so they thought. But as the days passed, the hum grew stronger, deeper, more resonant. It was no longer just a tremor in the ground. It was a force, a presence that seemed to grow with every passing moment. The air itself seemed to vibrate, heavy with a strange energy that made the Empire's advanced sensors flicker in confusion. The ships above, which had been effortlessly monitoring Earth's atmosphere, began to experience interference. Communication signals began to distort, power grids in the ships flickered, and navigation systems started malfunctioning. Something deep within the planet was awakening, and it was causing the Empire's once perfect systems to fail. The commanders of the fleet gathered, their faces drawn tight with concern. What had begun as a simple conquest had turned into an unanticipated quagmire. They had destroyed Earth's communications, crippled its infrastructure, and yet something on this planet was still resisting. It was not the humans. They had long since abandoned their cities, left their homes, and refused to engage. But there was something else, something hidden beneath the crust of the world. "What is happening?" demanded one of the senior officers, staring at his malfunctioning display. The once perfect readings from Earth had turned chaotic, random flashes of data scrambling on the screen. Is it Earth's core? Some kind of natural disaster? The planet was behaving unpredictably, and the Empire's commanders were caught off guard. There was no scientific explanation for it. Nothing in the Empire's vast database mentioned anything of this nature. The readings were unlike anything the Empire had encountered in their long reign. It was not a natural seismic event. It was something else entirely, something far more deliberate. Then came the first sign of the power beneath the surface. The Empire's ships, once invulnerable to anything on Earth, suddenly began to lose altitude. Their thrusters, once fine-tuned to maintain their orbit, sputtered out of control. The once pristine, advanced warships buckled and swayed as the energy within the planet's crust reached a fever pitch. At first, the commanders thought it was a freak malfunction. But when the flagship began to plummet, tumbling out of orbit as if something invisible was holding it down, panic rippled through the Empire's ranks. "We've lost control of the fleet," shouted one officer, clutching the console as if it might help him regain control. "The energy it's coming from the planet, from the core." The energy surged again, this time much more intensely. The ships that had been hovering above Earth's atmosphere began to fall from the sky, their systems failing completely. The Empire's greatest weapon, its fleet of invincible warships, was being disabled one by one. The force was not coming from human weapons, nor from anything the Empire had seen before. It was something ancient, something hidden beneath the Earth, something humanity had left dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken. It was not the planet's core that had risen. It was an ancient defense system, buried deep within Earth's crust, activated long ago by the first humans. A system designed to protect the world from external threats. The planet's true weapon, hidden in plain sight, was now reawakening, and its energy was flooding through the Empire's fleet like an unstoppable tide. The warships were crippled, falling toward Earth's surface, unable to even fire their weapons in self-defense. The hum intensified, filling the atmosphere with a low, vibrating sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The energy flowed through the very fabric of space around Earth, affecting everything in its path. The Empire's once perfect technology, built to withstand the greatest challenges of the galaxy, was now being torn apart by a force it couldn't even begin to understand. As the fleet continued to fall from the sky, the officers on the flagship could only watch in disbelief. The Empire's might was being shattered by an unseen hand, a force that had remained dormant for millennia. And the more they tried to fight back, the more their ships were pulled into the planetary storm. For the first time in their long history, the Empire found itself at the mercy of a world they had thought of as insignificant, an Earth that had remained silent until now. The power hidden within the planet was rising, and it was clear that humanity had known about it all along. The Empire had underestimated not just Earth's ability to resist, but the ancient weapon buried beneath its surface, a weapon that, it seemed, was now fully awake. The once feared Empire, its fleet of advanced warships now in disarray, plummeted toward Earth, unable to regain control. The energy emanating from the planet's core surged like a living force, overwhelming every technological defense the Empire had relied upon. In orbit, the remaining ships struggled to stay aloft, their systems locked in a state of permanent failure. The Empire's commanders, once so confident in their technological supremacy, now found themselves helpless in the face of an ancient power they had never anticipated. On the ground, humanity watched in silence. The cities, though devastated by the Empire's earlier bombardments, were still. People moved through the wreckage, but they did so without panic. The world's major governments had long since ceased to operate under their own authority. Instead, it was as if Earth itself had taken the reins, guiding its own fate through the force of its long-dormant defenses. The quiet from Earth's people had not been one of submission, but of preparation, waiting for the moment when the world's true strength would be revealed. Across the shattered cities, the vibrations in the Earth intensified. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, as if the very planet was awakening from a long slumber. It was no longer a subtle undercurrent. It was a roar, a chorus of power resonating through the ground, sky, and space itself. Humanity's silence now seemed to be the key that had activated the planet's hidden defenses, and with each passing moment, the force grew stronger. High above Earth, the remaining Empire ships were descending, spiraling out of control. The Empire's generals, in their final moments, could do nothing but watch as their fleets were torn apart by the invisible grip of Earth's defenses. Their communication systems were flooded with strange, unreadable data, and their weapons, once so precise, were now malfunctioning, unable to fire or lock onto their targets. The flagship, a colossal warship designed to withstand the fiercest battles in the galaxy, was now nothing more than a helpless, falling hulk. As it descended into the atmosphere, its once pristine shields flickered and failed. The outer hull began to crack under the strain, as though something beneath the surface of the planet was pulling at it, dragging it down like a powerful magnet. The Empire's finest ship, which had once been impervious to all threats, was now at the mercy of a force it could not even comprehend. And then, from the heart of Earth itself, a blinding flash of light erupted, a pulse of energy so intense that it lit up the entire planet. The light was not just a flash, it was a wave, a shock wave that traveled across the planet's surface and out into the surrounding space. The pulse was like the heartbeat of the Earth itself, resonating through the very fabric of the cosmos. It was the final, decisive act of the planet's awakening. The pulse tore through the remaining ships in orbit, annihilating them in seconds. Their once mighty hulls were shredded, their advanced systems rendered useless in an instant. The flash of energy expanded, stretching outward like the ripples of a cosmic stone thrown into the vastness of space. The fleet, the Empire's pride, was gone. Earth had spoken. It had awakened its ancient weapon, and the result was complete devastation for those who dared challenge it. On the surface, humanity felt the pulse reverberate through the ground, but their reaction was not one of fear, it was one of relief. The Earth had defended itself. The silence that had been so unsettling to the Empire now seemed like the calm before the storm. Earth had waited, prepared, and in the end, it had won. The Empire, in its arrogance, had underestimated the true strength of this small blue planet. The world remained still, as it had always been, but now there was a sense of finality in the air. The Empire's invasion was over. The silence from Earth had not been the silence of surrender, but the silence of strength. The planet had endured, and the invaders had been undone. What was once a world of quiet, fragile humans had now become the graveyard of an empire. As the last remnants of the Empire's fleet disintegrated in the atmosphere, a new chapter in Earth's history began to unfold, one not of submission, but of a power that had long been hidden, waiting for the right moment to rise. And now, that moment had arrived. With the final remnants of the Empire's fleet disintegrating in the skies, Earth stood silent once more. The energy pulse that had erupted from the planet's core had radiated out like a cosmic wave, wiping away the last vestiges of the invaders' technology. The once feared empire, so confident in its superiority, was now reduced to a memory, scattered across the burning atmosphere and the silent remains of their shattered ships. The Earth, bruised and battered, had proven its power in a way no one could have predicted. The planet had defended itself not with weapons of war, but with an ancient force hidden beneath the surface, an energy that had been waiting, dormant, for millennia. On the ground, humanity moved through the wreckage of their cities, but this time, there was no fear in their eyes. The world was scared, but it was alive. The pulse had not just disabled the Empire's fleet, it had restored balance, a balance that had been lost long ago. The people who had once lived in constant fear of an unstoppable invasion now stood in the aftermath, witnessing the dawn of a new era. For the first time in history, Earth's inhabitants were united. In the silence that followed the Empire's fall, there was no division, no conflict, only a shared understanding that their world had been spared, that their planet had fought back, and that something much greater than any human weapon had protected them. The nations that had once been fractured by petty squabbles now turned toward one another, their eyes fixed on the future, knowing that together they had weathered the storm. In the ruins of major cities, there were no military parades or celebrations of victory. The people knew that they had not won through force or violence, but through something far more profound. The Earth itself had decided to fight back, and humanity had simply been the witnesses to its strength. The silence that had so unnerved the Empire was now a symbol of Earth's resilience, a resilience that no invader could ever hope to understand. As the dust settled and the skies cleared, small groups of survivors began to rebuild. It wasn't just physical reconstruction that needed to be done. The human spirit, once fractured and divided, now had to rebuild itself. The Empire's invasion had shown them the power of unity, the power of patience, and the power of the planet that had always watched over them. They had not relied on armies, nor had they called on foreign allies. They had relied on the Earth itself, and it had delivered them from destruction. But the rebuilding would not be easy. The planet was not unscathed, and the damage caused by the Empire's initial strikes could not be undone overnight. The cities lay in ruins, and the world's infrastructure had been shattered. Yet there was a new sense of purpose in the air. The Earth had spoken, and its message was clear. Humanity was not to be destroyed. Not now, not ever. In the weeks following the invasion's end, Earth's leaders, those who had survived the destruction, gathered in secret. They knew they would have to rethink everything they knew about their place in the universe. The Empire's arrogance had been their downfall, but it had also been humanity's wake-up call. The old ways of thinking, the divisions between nations, the reliance on technology and power, those things had all proven to be fragile in the face of something far older and more powerful. And humanity had not only survived, but had been granted a second chance. In the quiet aftermath of the battle, one thing became clear. Earth had not only survived, but it had learned to stand tall. The planet's ancient defenses had reminded humanity of their true strength. No longer would they be beholden to the whims of outside powers. Earth had its own power, its own resilience, and it had proven it to the galaxy. And as the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light over the shattered cities, Earth began to rebuild, not just with bricks and steel, but with a newfound sense of unity and purpose. The silence, once a symbol of submission, had now become the most powerful weapon of all. A weapon no empire could ever hope to conquer again. A new dawn had come for Earth, and it would never again be the same. Months passed since the defeat of the Empire, and the silence that had once gripped Earth like a shroud was now something different. It was no longer the eerie, unnerving stillness that had perplexed the invaders. It had transformed into something deeper, a quiet strength that resonated through the rebuilt cities and across the newly united nations. The Earth had proven its resilience, its power, and humanity had proven that they, too, were capable of standing in the face of seemingly insurmountable forces. The first steps toward recovery were slow but deliberate. The cities that had been obliterated by the Empire's assault were slowly being restored. While the damage had been catastrophic, there was a newfound sense of determination in the air. Governments, no longer focused on rivalry or division, worked together to heal the scars left behind. What had once been fragmented nations were now united in a common purpose: to rebuild, to honor the legacy of their survival, and to ensure that Earth's defenses remained intact for whatever might come next. Though the physical scars of the invasion were slowly erased, the memories of the Empire's assault would never be forgotten. Yet there was no bitterness, no desire for revenge. Earth had not needed to engage in brutal warfare to secure its victory. It had relied on the ancient power buried deep within its core, a power that had been triggered not by a call for destruction, but by the simple act of patience, of waiting until the moment was right. It was during the rebuilding efforts that something extraordinary began to happen. People from all corners of the world began to gather in the ruins of the once thriving cities, not to mourn, but to celebrate the Earth's victory. They understood now that the planet's ancient defenses were not merely weapons of destruction. They were symbols of protection. The Earth had, for millennia, watched over its inhabitants, and when the time came, it had fought for them. Humanity, in turn, would protect the Earth and ensure that its power remained untouched. But even as Earth's recovery continued, the world had begun to look toward the stars. The Empire had made a critical mistake in underestimating Earth's potential. The invaders had assumed that their superior technology and military power would be enough to crush any resistance. They had failed to understand that Earth was not just a planet. It was a living, breathing entity, one with its own deep-rooted power, and one that had an intelligence far beyond the comprehension of any invading force. Scientists and scholars from across the globe began to study the energy pulse that had destroyed the Empire's fleet. What was it that had activated the planet's core? Could it be harnessed? And what would be the consequences of tapping into that energy? These were questions that humanity had never considered before, but now they had no choice but to confront them. As Earth's leaders gathered to discuss the planet's future, they agreed on one thing. The ancient power was not just a defense, it was a gift that humanity had not earned but had been entrusted with. It was not to be used recklessly, but rather, it was to be protected and understood. Earth had granted its people a second chance, and they would honor that chance by safeguarding the very force that had saved them. And then, a transmission came. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint ripple in the electromagnetic spectrum. But as it grew stronger, it became clear. Someone, or something, was reaching out. The Empire's forces had been utterly destroyed, but this new message came from beyond the reaches of the galaxy. It was a single word: why? The question hung in the air like a challenge, as if the universe itself was demanding an answer. The silence that had once been so unsettling now seemed to carry a weight of its own, as if Earth's survival had sent a message to those who would dare to invade. Earth was not just a passive world. It was a force to be reckoned with, a power that had been awakened, and the universe was watching. Humanity stood at the threshold of something new. Earth's legacy of silence had become a legacy of strength. And now, as the stars beckoned, humanity had to decide what they would do with the power they had inherited. Would they stand in quiet defiance against those who would seek to conquer? Or would they embrace the silence, waiting once more for the moment when the Earth would call on its ancient defenses to protect them once again? The answer, like the planet's ancient power, lay dormant for now. But one thing was certain: Earth had changed, and so had its people. The galaxy would no longer view Earth as a backwater, as a silent and insignificant world. Earth had awakened, and its message was clear. No one would ever underestimate them again. The silence was no longer just the absence of sound. It was the beginning of a new era. An era where Earth would be its own protector, its own voice in the vastness of space. The Empire was gone. The silence remained. And in that silence, humanity found its true strength.